You ever find yourself just sick of playing hard games? I do. There's probably a reason why. Let's talk about it. So what's the first thing you do when you boot up a video game? For me, it's always been the same. Head straight to the settings, crank up the difficulty to the hardest mode available. It's like a reflex at this point. Playing a game on anything less than hard felt like cheating myself out of the full experience. When I was younger, I lived for the thrill of tough games. You know those games where the difficulty was brutal and every victory felt like a hard-earned triumph? Yeah, but life was simpler. The only challenges I had were the ones I chose, like taking down a near impossible boss, or mastering a game that tested every ounce of my reflex and skill. That was my escape, my way of proving something, probably to myself more than anyone else. Then life starts throwing real challenges at you. You know the kind: work, responsibilities, relationships. Suddenly the idea of spending hours just to beat a single boss didn't seem as appealing. If you're like me, you go to gaming as a way to unwind, have fun, or even just challenge yourself or do something competitive. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't having as much fun anymore. I was just stubbornly pushing through because I didn't want to admit that maybe I wasn't as good. I remember back in the day, I wouldn't play games unless I was playing on hard mode. Then a few years ago, I stumbled across games like Stardew Valley and Terraria. These games weren't about punishing difficulty. They were about building, exploring, and enjoying a different kind of a challenge. For a while, I thought I'd found a new path in gaming, one that didn't require me to be constantly on edge. That didn't last long. I found myself pulled back to the hardcore difficulty, screaming at my TV screen, "Fuck!" It's part of me that couldn't let go of the idea that game had to be tough just for it to be fun. My friends would look at me and go like, "Bro, what's wrong with you? Why are you raging out? Are you even having fun?" I'd literally laugh it off and be like, "Yeah, this is how I have fun."
I hope you suffer, Batman, like I've suffered.
There's this weird ego that comes into play. It's like if there's a harder mode available, I have to beat it. No excuses. Every mechanic of the game, master it in a way that playing on normal just doesn't. But for what? Bragging rights and a sense of accomplishment? I don't even go for trophies and achievements. Why am I doing this? Maybe it's about proving to myself that I still got it. But when you have less time to game, you start to wonder if it's really worth it. Do I really want to spend 3 hours fighting the same boss over and over just to say I beat it on hard? And then there's the price. Let's not forget about the price. Please, $60, $70 plus more now. Ubisoft looking at you. Or even more on a new game. But it's another to spend that kind of money on something you never even finish. I've lost count of how many games are still sitting in my library half completed because I just couldn't bring myself to push through the game. It's frustrating. Not just because I want to see how the story ends, but because I feel like I'm wasting my money on something I'm not fully enjoying. We've all been there, buying into the hype of a new game. You've been in there too. Don't lie and say you haven't. There's this new game. It's going to recapture this old magic, only to find out that hours of frustrating gameplay after, it's just not clicking for you. And when you're older with less time and more responsibilities, that feels like something that doesn't pay off is just not worth it like that. It's not just about the money. It's about the time and energy you've invested and the disappointment that comes with realizing it's not worth it. Time is a precious resource and you can't gather more of it. That sounds corny, but this isn't a farming game. You can't get more, literally. When I was younger, I could spend an entire weekend on one game, refusing to put it down until I'd beaten it. Now those gaming sessions are fewer and far in between. When I do have time to play, I want to experience the game, see everything it has to offer, not just spend my limited free time stuck on one frustrating part. That's where the disconnect comes. Games that are intentionally tough, like Souls-like games, have always been some of my favorites. They don't give you a choice in difficulty, and I used to love that. The idea that you play the game the way the developers intended, no shortcuts, no easy mode. But as time goes on, I've started to question whether that's still the perfect gaming experience for me. If you're young and have the time, then hell yeah, enjoy the challenge. But when you've come home looking to unwind, the last thing you want to do is spend your night frustrated, banging your head against the wall on a boss that you can't beat. And even when you finally do beat it and you thought it would be fun, it's not. You don't get that same satisfying feeling. Do I just need to be good? Do I just need to get better? Am I getting worse? Maybe because I'm getting older and my reflexes aren't what they used to be? Sure, aging might play a role according to Google. That's a myth. And I know my reflexes are still super sharp. I don't know. I'm still as passionate as I ever was about gaming. The real difference, I think, is mindset. As we get older, our priorities shift. We start to value different things. It's not about beating a game on its hardest setting anymore. It's about experiencing the full game, the story, the atmosphere. I've come to terms that there's nothing wrong with that. Look at the rise of the cozy games movement. In recent years, it's a sign that a lot of gamers are starting to feel the same way I do. They just want to relax, to chill out with a game that doesn't stress them out. I've noticed a lot of my friends who used to be all about those hardcore PvP challenges are now more interested in just hanging out, farming, and having a more relaxed experience. They just want to unwind. It's a trend that seems to be growing as we get a bit older, but that doesn't mean you'll catch me farming potatoes in Stardew all day. Probably not. As amazing as those games are, they don't really provide the challenge I need in a game. So maybe the answer is compromise? Play on normal instead of hard? Sounds simple, right? Okay, what about Dark Souls? What about when there's no difficulty settings? Do I just stop playing some of my favorite games and genres? That doesn't feel right either. Do I use guides? That kind of takes the fun out of it. So what's the solution? Honestly, I'm still figuring it out. That's why you can still catch me live streaming, flipping off my monitor when I lose to the final boss, the 30th time on the latest Souls-like or difficult game. Maybe one day you'll hear me say I've traded in difficult challenges for farming potatoes in Stardew, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. In the meantime, I'm on the lookout for those indie games, the ones that strike that perfect balance. You know, the ones with a good difficulty but not make you want to throw your controller through the screen? I don't know. I think I'm going to stop treating normal difficulty like it's some kind of lesser mode. Often that's the way the devs want you to play and the way they intended for you to experience the game the way it's supposed to be experienced, so why not try just that? Do you got the same problems? If you want, we can talk about it down in the comments. Okay, thanks.